Why was the Pentagon's most secure corridor filled with the sound of alarms meant for nuclear breaches? No one could answer that, not yet. The shriek of security klaxons ricocheted off the marble walls, echoing like the building itself was protesting what it was about to witness. At the center of that echo walked a woman who shouldn't have been there in restraints. Major Elena Rodriguez moved between two armed guards, her wrists bound by polymer cuffs that dug faintly into her skin. The contrast was jarring. Her slim frame, the quiet discipline in her posture, the way her green eyes stayed forward even as the world's most powerful military officers turned to watch her pass. 15 pairs of eyes followed her into the Pentagon's inner briefing chamber. None blinked. These were faces that had shaped decades of conflict, admirals whose orders could erase cities, generals whose campaigns rewrote history textbooks the public would never read. Yet as she stepped through that vault-sealed door, their expressions betrayed something rawer than authority, suspicion, curiosity, and beneath that, fear. At the head of the curved table sat Admiral Marcus Stone, a mountain of a man. His shaved scalp caught the light like polished steel, and the service ribbons across his chest looked less like decoration and more like a record of how many storms he'd survived. His reputation filled the room before his voice did. "Major Rodriguez," he said, his tone carved from granite, "you stand accused of the most heinous act a soldier can commit: treason." The word fell heavy, almost ceremonial. Behind him, red-letter alerts flashed across panoramic screens. Security breach, level 1. 12 operatives missing. A smaller line blinked beneath access origin. Rodriguez/02, 37 a.m. 12 Americans vanished in the Syrian desert. And every breadcrumb pointed back to her. Elena didn't flinch, didn't plead. She simply stood taller, her wrists still bound, but her presence somehow larger than anyone else. There was no defiance in her eyes, only calculation, like she was solving an equation that everyone else had forgotten existed. "Your computer accessed classified operational files at the exact moment our people walked into an ambush," Stone continued, rising to his full height. 12 of our finest are missing because someone sold them out." Colonel Sarah Mitchell, thin, sharp, the Pentagon's resident ghost hunter of the digital realm, leaned forward. "The evidence is irrefutable, sir. Biometric verification, retinal match, voice pattern. No anomalies." Across the table, General Harrison Webb adjusted his reading glasses with judicial precision. "Major Rodriguez, how do you respond?" Her answer came without hesitation, but softly, almost like a confession to the air. "I was not at my terminal at that time, General. I maintain my innocence." Admiral Stone's laugh cracked through the room like a rifle shot. "Of course you weren't. The scanners all lied, the systems all failed, and the universe conspired to frame you. Is that your defense?" "Actually, Admiral," she replied, voice calm enough to silence the hum of machinery, "that's exactly what I'm suggesting." The murmurs began instantly. Papers rustled, eyes darted. For a moment, the most secure room in the nation's capital sounded like a crowded courtroom. Captain Miguel Torres, Stone's aide, sat near the edge of the table, loyal to a fault, young enough to believe in the purity of command. But as he watched the exchange, something twisted in his gut. The admiral seemed too eager, almost rehearsed. Dr. Richard Phillips, the tribunal's assigned psychologist, observed silently. Years of profiling taught him to recognize micro-expressions, twitching eyelids, jaw tension, uncontrolled breathing. But Elena's body language showed none of it. Her pulse steady, pupils unreactive to stress. She was composed beyond reason. Stone circled the table, predatory, lowering his voice. "Why? What did they pay you? What was worth 12 lives?" The silence that followed stretched until it hummed. Then Elena tilted her head slightly, as if studying him. "May I ask how long you've been monitoring my activities, Admiral?" That broke him for half a second. What kind of question is that? A relevant one. If I'm the threat you claim I am, surely there's been surveillance. I'd like to know the scope. Colonel Mitchell flipped open her tablet, brows furrowing. Standard protocols. Nothing beyond normal monitoring. Nothing beyond normal, Elena repeated. So no enhanced surveillance despite the breach risk you just described. General Webb frowned. Major, you're in no position to interrogate this tribunal. With respect, sir, she said, voice low but firm. I'm trying to understand how a breach of this magnitude occurred without triggering the automatic alerts that exist for every unauthorized access. Mitchell glanced at her data feed, confused. Elena's question wasn't defensive, it was investigative. Knowledgeable, too knowledgeable. Stone slammed his hand on the table, veins rising along his forearm. Deflection, classic tradecraft. You were caught, Major. Own it. Is it deflection, she countered quietly, or observation? Because someone truly trained in espionage would have vanished long before facing a tribunal. They wouldn't stand here asking to examine the evidence. Torres felt it again, that subtle, rational sting. She had a point. Why would a guilty person demand more scrutiny? Phillips noted every movement. Still no deceit markers. Instead, her questions showed pattern recognition, logic, and layered awareness beyond her rank. Stone's jaw flexed. We have proof. Logs, timing, data transfer, it all leads to you. Elena's voice softened but cut deeper. Then I have only one question. Have the missing operators been confirmed dead? No one answered. The fluorescent hum filled the void until Stone finally barked. That information is classified. Convenient, she replied. Because if they're not confirmed dead, then this tribunal is premature. We're trying a suspect before confirming a crime. Mitchell looked up, uncertain. Rescue operations are ongoing. So they're not dead, Elena said. Then the mission may still be active, and someone in this room already knows that. The accusation sliced through the air. Webb's hand lifted for order, but it was too late. The ripple of shock had spread. I'm not accusing, Elena added evenly. I'm asking why my arrest came before a proper forensic analysis of my system, why my terminal wasn't examined before declaring guilt, why an officer can be charged with treason based on data no one's verified. Torres, despite himself, began jotting notes. The pattern she drew was precise, methodical, and devastating. He'd assumed the evidence was airtight. Now it looked like a net deliberately woven to catch one fish. Phillips leaned in. Major, where did you learn this level of investigative protocol? Military intelligence, she said. Perhaps they trained me too well. Stone's patience snapped. Enough games, you betrayed your oath and your country. Then you won't mind if I demonstrate exactly how someone could have compromised my computer without my participation. The room froze, even Webb hesitated. Demonstrate. Give me access to a sealed system. No network connection, dummy files only. If I'm guilty, I'll fail. But if I can replicate the breach using knowledge beyond my clearance, then you'll know something else is happening. Stone barked, absolutely not. Torres surprised himself. Sir, if she can prove her innocence, wouldn't that serve justice better than a rushed execution? The Admiral turned on him, eyes burning. Captain Torres, remember your place. My place, Torres said, swallowing hard, is to ensure justice, not expedience. Phillips nodded slightly. Her willingness to expose evidence supports her claim. Guilty individuals avoid examination, not invite it. Elena watched the dynamic shift like a chessboard she'd seen rearranged 1,000 times. Stone's agitation, Mitchell's curiosity, Torres' moral pulse reawakening, Phillips's analytic hunger. Every reaction told her something. I have one more question, she said, voice steady. Has anyone confirmed that those 12 operators followed the mission parameters I supposedly compromised, or were they acting under separate orders? Stone's color drained. That's above your clearance. Then how, Elena asked softly, Could I betray details I wasn't cleared to know? Mitchell's fingers flew over her screen, cross-checking clearance levels. Her face tightened. Admiral, her access shouldn't have allowed entry to those mission files at all. So she escalated privileges, Stone snapped. Then it would appear in the logs, Mitchell countered. But it doesn't. Elena inclined her head. Perhaps you'll also find anomalies in the timestamps, duplicate entries, automated sequences. Mitchell looked closer. There are irregularities, minor but real. Webb sat back, studying the scene like a man seeing the edges of a painting finally revealed. Then we'll recess. Colonel Mitchell, verify the data. Dr. Phillips, continue your evaluation. Captain Torres, review the operational timeline. 2 hours. Stone shot to his feet. This is a waste of time. No, Admiral, Webb said quietly. This is justice. As the tribunal adjourned, guards guided Elena to a secure holding room. Through the reinforced glass she could see analysts swarming around terminals, data flowing like oxygen. She could tell from their pace, they were finding things. She closed her eyes briefly, breathing even, controlled. The sound of chaos outside didn't touch her, it never did. Across the hall, Mitchell cornered Stone, her voice low but urgent. Admiral, we're uncovering anomalies that don't align with Rodriguez's activity. What kind of anomalies? Automated patterns, encrypted data from external origins, someone outside our network. Stone's jaw set, but his hands trembled as he checked his secure phone. You're overanalyzing. Focus on Rodriguez. Torres joined them holding a tablet. Sir, there's something else. 2 mission logs for Syria, different coordinates, same timestamp. It looks like there were 2 missions running under one code name. Mitchell's eyes widened. That would explain the conflicting access patterns. Stone's phone vibrated again. He read the encrypted message. His face paled. Excuse me, he muttered, stepping away. Mitchell watched him leave, unease threading her expression. Captain, how well do you know the Admiral? He's been my mentor, Torres said quietly. But lately something's off, paranoid, secretive. Through the glass, Elena watched them. She could read every shift in posture. The pattern was unfolding exactly as planned. Dr. Phillips approached her enclosure. Major, may I continue our assessment? She nodded. Your composure is extraordinary, he said. No elevated cortisol response, no visible anxiety. How do you explain that? Training, she said. He studied her. Not standard training. Your physiological control is consistent with advanced conditioning used by intelligence operatives. She smiled faintly. Or maybe I'm just calm under pressure. Phillips returned the smile, half admiring, half unnerved. Major, I've evaluated thousands. You're different. Before she could respond, the alarms blared again, this time deeper, more urgent. Red strobes flooded the corridor. Mitchell sprinted back, breath sharp. We're under cyber attack, multiple vectors. Someone's inside our network. Elena rose slowly, cuffs rattling. Which systems? The same databases tied to your case, Mitchell said. They're targeting Middle East ops. Elena's pulse didn't change. Then whoever's attacking is the same party who framed me. Stone burst into the room, sweat beading his temples. Shut down external connections immediately. That'll isolate us but also hide their tracks, Mitchell argued. Follow my orders, Colonel. Elena's voice cut through the noise. Admiral, disconnecting now will help them vanish. Are you sure that's what you want? He spun on her, fury unmasked. You don't give orders here. Then why, she asked quietly, do your orders protect the enemy? The words landed like shrapnel. Tor's hand went to his holster, instinctively protective. Mitchell froze at her console. Phillips watched, mind racing. Elena met Stone's eyes. How long have you been taking payments from foreign intelligence? The room fell still. For the first time, Marcus Stone looked like a man cornered. For a long, suspended moment, no one moved. Even the alarms seemed to hold their breath. The red lights pulsed over faces that had been certain of their roles only minutes ago, prosecutors, analysts, soldiers, now frozen between belief and disbelief. Elena stood behind reinforced glass, still cuffed, her posture a paradox of calm inside chaos. Her voice had been quiet, but the echo of her question, "How long have you been taking payments from foreign intelligence?" still hung like smoke in the air. Admiral Marcus Stone stared at her, pale beneath the weight of what she just said. For a man whose career had been defined by control, his silence was the first real confession. Colonel Sarah Mitchell broke first. "Admiral, is there any truth to what she just implied?" Stone blinked, his jaw flexing. "Colonel, watch your tone." Dr. Phillips, the psychologist, closed his tablet softly, eyes narrowing. "Sir, your reaction." "Enough," Stone's voice boomed. He turned to the guards outside Elena's cell. "Remove her from this facility, now." But the guards didn't move. They looked at Colonel Mitchell, not him. Something in the hierarchy had shifted. Elena watched Stone's panic bloom like a stain through water. The human mind, she thought, always shows its cracks when the story it's been telling itself stops holding together. "Colonel," she said calmly, "check his personal access logs for the last 6 months. Look for outbound transmissions to non-military servers." Mitchell hesitated, caught between protocol and instinct. "That would require authorization." "Then consider this your authorization," General Webb interjected from behind. His voice, usually slow and measured, carried a new edge. "Do it, Colonel." Stone spun toward Webb. "You have no jurisdiction." "I have every jurisdiction necessary when the integrity of this tribunal is compromised," Webb cut in sharply. For the first time since entering the Pentagon, Elena allowed herself to take a full breath. The tide was turning not because she had overpowered anyone, but because truth, once cracked open, spreads like light through the smallest fissure. Colonel Mitchell typed rapidly on her encrypted console. Her fingers moved with mechanical precision, her eyes scanning cascading lines of code. Everyone waited. Even the alarm seemed a background hum now, part of the theater of revelation. "I'm detecting something," she murmured. "Multiple outbound, encrypted data packets routed through a civilian proxy, originating from Admiral Stone's terminal." Stone's hand twitched toward his sidearm. Captain Torres saw it first. His own weapon cleared the holster halfway before his mind even caught up. "Sir, I need you to step away from the console." Stone's eyes flicked between Tor's pistol, Mitchell's console, and Elena behind the glass. For the first time he looked old, human, trapped. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," he hissed. "Then help us understand," Tor said. "Who, we?" Stone gave a small, bitter laugh. "You think the world is as simple as your little chain of command. You think loyalty keeps nations safe." Dr. Phillips leaned forward slightly. "What keeps them safe, Admiral?" "Balance," Stone whispered. "Deals, compromises that keep the peace. You call it treason, I call it realism." Elena watched him, her expression unreadable. There it was, the justification, the disease that grew in the cracks of conscience, the belief that betrayal was strategy, not sin. "Admiral," she said, voice barely above a whisper, "realism doesn't sell coordinates for human lives." Something in his composure shattered. "Colonel Mitchell," General Webb said sharply, "continue tracing those transmissions." "I already have," Mitchell replied, her voice rising as the screen filled with connections, data trails, spiderwebbing across continents. "Sir, I'm seeing transfers linked to a corporate front in Zurich, rerouted through servers in Istanbul, Tel Aviv, and finally, Moscow." The last name silenced even the alarms. "Moscow," Torres repeated. "Yes," Mitchell confirmed. "Encrypted transactions totaling 2.7 million over 18 months. The credentials used are verified against Admiral Stone's personal access ID." Webb's face hardened. That's enough. Captain, take the Admiral into custody. Stone's voice broke through before the guards could move. You fools! You have no idea what's coming. Torres stepped forward, weapon raised. Sir, stand down. But Stone's panic turned feral. She's not what she says she is, he roared, pointing at Elena. She's ISA, deep cover. You think she's innocent. She's been using all of you. Mitchell froze. ISA. The acronym wasn't supposed to exist outside Whispers. The intelligence support activity, the blackest of black units, so far off the books that even the CIA's shadow looked bright by comparison. Phillips glanced at Elena through the glass. Is that true? Elena didn't move. I can't confirm or deny operational affiliations. That's confirmation, Mitchell whispered. The tension cracked like dry ice. Tor's finger hovered near the trigger, unsure where to aim it now, at the Admiral, at the accused operative, or at the truth unraveling around them. Stone seized the moment. You think she's the hero here, you're pawns in her operation. She set this whole thing up. Elena's voice cut through, quiet but precise. If that were true, Admiral, you wouldn't be sweating through your shirt. Mitchell turned her screen for all to see. Transmission history doesn't lie, sir. You funded a network responsible for the deaths of American operatives. You used Major Rodriguez's credentials to divert suspicion, while your contacts extracted data under cover of her name. You can't prove that, Stone shouted. Phillips's tone turned clinical. Denial. Stage 2. Adrenal stress response, visible tremor in the dominant hand, narrowing pupils, guilt indicators off the chart. Enough with your psychobabble, Stone snapped. Elena stepped closer to the glass. You once told me, Admiral, that loyalty is measured by the weight of the secrets you carry. Tell me, how heavy did they become before you sold them? For a second, everything about him collapsed. Mitchell's console beeped sharply. Sir, external connections shutting down, but not by us. Someone else is cutting links manually. Lock it down, Webb ordered. I can't, she said. The commands are being executed from a secondary terminal, internal. Tor's voice came tight. Admiral. Stone's breathing grew shallow. You don't understand. They're already inside. Shutting connections means they escape with the data. Then why did you order it? Torres asked. Stone didn't answer. Mitchell's eyes widened. Because he's still protecting them. That was the moment the facade fell completely. Stone reached for his weapon and found Torres already faster. 2 guards pinned him within seconds, the sound of metal scraping marble echoing like punctuation at the end of a long deception. The same chair that had held Elena hours before now held Admiral Marcus Stone. Torres holstered his weapon slowly. Sir, you're under arrest for treason, espionage, and conspiracy. Stone said nothing. He stared past them all at Elena, the woman he'd underestimated so completely. Mitchell forwarded her findings to the tribunal's secure archive. Data streams filled the air with a soft, mechanical hum. Phillips spoke quietly, almost reverently. Major Rodriguez, who are you really? Elena exhaled slowly, like a diver surfacing after a long mission beneath the ice. Someone who was doing her job. Mitchell looked up. The data shows his access credentials matched every breach attributed to you. He created the false trail. Of course he did, Elena said. That's why he insisted on a public tribunal, a distraction. The silence that followed felt heavier than the alarms ever had. General Webb stood, every motion deliberate. Colonel, notify Counterintelligence Command. We'll need a full sweep of the Admiral's communications. Dr. Phillips, continue your psychological evaluation of Major Rodriguez. Captain Torres. Yes, sir. You stay with her. I want your report firsthand. Torres nodded, though his pulse still thundered. Through the glass, Elena watched Stone, now restrained in the same position she had been in. His breathing came in shallow bursts, his eyes darting like a cornered animal. The arrogance was gone. Only the fear remained. Phillips leaned closer to her. "You knew, didn't you, all along?" "I suspected," she said. "I didn't have proof until today." "And the 12 missing operators?" "They're not missing," she said softly. "They're working, the operation's still in motion." Mitchell stopped typing. "What operation?" Elena met her gaze through the glass. "The one meant to expose the Admiral's entire network." "Meaning?" "Meaning," Elena said, her tone level but weighted, "this tribunal wasn't my punishment. It was his trap." Outside, the last of the alarms faded into silence, but the quiet that followed wasn't peace. It was realization. Torres sank into the nearest chair, staring at her like seeing a ghost. "You orchestrated this, all of it." Elena's eyes didn't blink. "Not alone. There are others, people you'll never meet, people who don't exist on paper." Phillips murmured, "ISA." Elena tilted her head, offering neither confirmation nor denial. Through the glass, Admiral Stone suddenly laughed, a hollow, broken sound. "You think you've won. You've only exposed one thread. Pull it, and you'll find the whole tapestry collapsing on your heads." Mitchell ignored him, her voice steady. "Sir, evidence transmission complete. Counterintelligence has verified the external routing. They're mobilizing arrests in Zurich and Istanbul." Webb nodded grimly. "Then it's over." But Elena shook her head. "No, General, it's just beginning. His contacts won't go quietly. And if he's been compromised this long, that means someone much higher authorized protection he never should have had." Torres looked at her, eyes searching. "You think there's another leak?" "I don't think," Elena said softly. "I know." The words landed like a classified truth, stamped too dangerous to admit. Phillips's pen hovered above his tablet, then stopped. "You planned this exposure, but you also planned what comes next, didn't you?" Elena turned toward him. "Doctor, people like me don't plan what comes next. We prepare for it." Her gaze shifted back to Stone, bound, sweating but silent now. And for the briefest moment, her eyes softened, not with pity but with something deeper, recognition. She had seen that same look in captured operatives, the dawning awareness that every lie eventually demands payment. Torres broke the silence first. "Ma'am, what happens now?" Elena looked at him. "Now, Captain, we let the truth finish what it started." The war room lights dimmed as the last of the alarms died. In the fading red glow, the once accused soldier and the fallen admiral locked eyes one final time, predator and prey switching roles in the space of an afternoon. And somewhere, beyond the walls of the Pentagon, 12 operators moved unseen through the desert night, their mission still unfolding, the hidden hand behind the day's revelations, and the reason Elena Rodriguez had walked into this building ready to be condemned. Because she'd never come here to defend herself. She'd come to finish the operation. How do you rebuild trust inside a building designed to keep secrets? No one in the Pentagon's inner corridors could answer that, not after what had just happened. The alarms were gone now, replaced by a different kind of noise, the quiet hum of damage control. People spoke in hushed voices, footsteps hurried through the marble halls, and the tension that hung in the air felt less like relief and more like aftermath. Admiral Marcus Stone was in custody. The man whose reputation had once towered over Washington now sat in a containment chair, wrists magnetically locked, head lowered in defeat. His betrayal was undeniable, his empire of deception finally exposed. But the real question wasn't how he fell. It was who had helped him rise that far without being caught. Elena Rodriguez watched from the observation chamber. Her cuffs were gone now, but the marks they'd left still circled her wrists, faint reminders of what she'd been willing to risk. Freedom, rank, even her name. Colonel Sarah Mitchell stood beside her, staring at the evidence feed scrolling across the monitors. The data was irrefutable. Stone's access credentials had been used to transmit classified intelligence through a web of shell companies, dummy servers, and encrypted proxies. The pattern was elegant, too elegant to be the work of a single man. Mitchell's voice was soft but edged with disbelief. 18 months of this, right under our noses. Elena's reply came quiet, reflective. You'd be surprised how long people ignore what they don't want to see. Mitchell glanced sideways at her. You sound like you've seen this before. I have, Elena said, too many times. Captain Miguel Torres entered, still in partial uniform. The adrenaline of the last hour barely faded. He stopped at the threshold like he wasn't sure if he was supposed to salute her or ask for forgiveness. Ma'am, he said finally, counterintelligence confirmed the arrests in Zurich and Istanbul. They've detained 4 assets connected to Stone's network. We've also recovered encrypted data caches from his personal terminals. Elena nodded, and the 12 operatives. Torres hesitated. Alive, all of them, but their still dark communications are intermittent. CIA Field Command says their mission parameters are now classified under a different operation name. She exhaled softly, almost imperceptibly. Then it worked. Torres frowned. What worked? The trap, Elena said simply. The tribunal, the breach, all of it. It was designed to trigger the final stage. Mitchell turned sharply toward her. Wait, you're telling me this entire tribunal was orchestrated? Elena met her gaze, steady and unflinching. Every accusation, every piece of fabricated evidence, every word the Admiral thought he controlled. We needed him to believe he was winning. Mitchell took a step back, disbelief flickering across her face. You risked execution, public exposure. That's what deep cover is, Elena said quietly. The difference between success and death is about 3 seconds of hesitation. Torres leaned against the wall, trying to process it all. So the 12 operatives in Syria, they weren't victims. They were bait, Elena said, and very good ones. Mitchell pressed a hand against her forehead, half in awe, half in shock. My God. It's not God, Elena murmured. It's planning. Dr. Richard Phillips entered the room then, his tablet filled with psychological reports, but his expression was different. Not the detached curiosity of a clinician, but the dawning respect of a man realizing the person he'd evaluated was nothing like what he thought. Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez, he said deliberately, the title carrying weight now. I've just reviewed the full chain of evidence. Everything aligns with what you predicted hours before the breach even began. That kind of foresight isn't luck. It's observation, Elena replied. When you've been trained to notice the smallest inconsistencies, you start seeing the world in patterns. Phillips nodded slowly. But that level of composure under stress, that's not training alone. It's something else, something internal. Elena didn't answer. She was watching the monitors, her eyes fixed on one particular feed, the live camera from the secure holding cell. Admiral Stone sat slumped, flanked by 2 guards. His eyes were open, unfocused, his lips moving slightly as if whispering to ghosts only he could see. Mitchell followed her gaze. What happens to him now? He'll face a closed military tribunal, Elena said. They'll strip his rank, revoke his pension, and confine him for the rest of his life. Justice, Mitchell muttered. Elena's eyes stayed on the screen. Justice is relative, truth is what matters. There was a pause. A long, heavy pause filled with the sound of distant doors, ceiling, and classified orders being whispered through encrypted lines. Then quietly, Mitchell asked the question everyone else had been too afraid to voice. Who are you, really? Elena didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached up and removed the small name tag still clipped to her t-shirt, RODRIGUEZ, and placed it gently on the console. My name is operational, she said. It changes as the mission requires. Torres frowned. So Elena Rodriguez was a cover, she finished. But not a lie. Every cover has to carry enough truth to survive pressure. Philip studied her face, the calmness that never seemed to crack. And Black Widow. For the first time, she almost smiled. That's the name they gave me after an operation in the Caucasus. It stuck. Mitchell leaned against the console, shaking her head. You realize this entire situation reads like a psychological nightmare, right? We accused one of our own of treason, staged a tribunal, and nearly executed the only person who knew what was really happening. That's why it worked, Elena said softly. No one questions a lie that looks exactly like the truth. The intercom crackled. A disembodied voice echoed through the room. Colonel Mitchell, General Webb requests you and Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez in the war room immediately. Priority code Alpha Black. Mitchell looked at Elena. What now? Elena's tone didn't change. The part where the real war begins. The war room had changed. The large digital screens that once displayed red-letter alerts now pulsed with shifting maps: Eastern Europe, the Mediterranean, Central Asia. The threat matrix had evolved. General Webb stood at the center, surrounded by a ring of high-ranking intelligence officers, each speaking in the low, precise rhythm of crisis management. As Elena and Mitchell entered, conversations paused. Even here, where everyone's clearance was measured in top-secret acronyms, her presence drew a kind of quiet gravity. Webb gestured to the main display. We intercepted chatter between Stone's contacts and a foreign intelligence channel within the last hour. The content suggests the breach wasn't an isolated operation. It was part of a larger framework. Elena stepped closer, studying the waveform patterns on the screen. Do we know who's running it? Not yet, Webb said. But the transmission protocols match operations we've seen before: Moscow, Tehran, parts of the Balkans. This is coordinated. Meaning? Mitchell asked. Elena's voice dropped lower. Meaning Stone wasn't the architect, he was a node, a handler for something bigger. Torres entered then, carrying a sealed folder. Sir, we pulled financial data from the Zurich front. There's a secondary fund, untraceable accounts linked to something called Project Ravel. Elena's eyes narrowed. Ravel, that's not new. Mitchell frowned. You've heard of it. Classified black funding line, Elena said, used by foreign intelligence alliances to disguise joint operations. The name's symbolic, from the composer Maurice Ravel. He wrote Bolero, repetitive, building tension until it explodes. Webb nodded grimly. Appropriate. Our analysts think Ravel refers to layered infiltration. Multiple agents embedded across Allied defense systems, each feeding data upward without realizing who they're working for. Mitchell looked at Elena. So Stone was one layer. Elena nodded, and pulling him out may have triggered the next. The room fell silent. Webb turned to her. Lieutenant Colonel, you spent 18 months embedded under Stone's command. If anyone can anticipate what comes next, it's you. What's their next move? Elena stared at the world map for a long moment before answering. They'll activate contingency assets, low-visibility operatives with clean backgrounds, ready to burn everything that leads back to Moscow. Priority targets will be data recovery, witness elimination, and asset extraction. Torres swallowed. You mean they'll come for us? Elena's tone was matter-of-fact. They already are. Mitchell glanced toward the digital clock. 48 hours. Then what do we do? Elena turned toward her, eyes sharp with purpose. We make them think we're still divided. Stone's arrest gives them confidence. They'll assume the Americans are scrambling. We'll feed that narrative. Webb crossed his arms. Controlled leaks. Elena nodded. Exactly. We'll let them believe the investigation fractured our command. Meanwhile, our counterintelligence teams will track every emergency communication their network sends in response. Phillips, who had entered quietly, watched her with a strange blend of admiration and concern. You speak about deception the way most people speak about breathing. Elena met his gaze, because for some of us it's the only way to stay alive. Webb approached her, lowering his voice. You understand the implications of this, Lieutenant Colonel. We can't keep you in the U.S. now. You're too visible. Too many eyes saw what happened today. Elena nodded once. I figured. You'll be reassigned to a classified operation overseas, new cover, new identity, possibly permanent. She looked at him steadily, understood. Torres stepped forward before he could stop himself. Sir, with respect, she just saved the Pentagon, and we're sending her away. Webb's tone softened slightly. Captain, she doesn't belong in the Pentagon. She belongs to the world it protects. Elena gave a faint smile, not pride, not sadness, just understanding. He's right, Captain. People like me don't retire. We disappear. Mitchell stared at her. So this is it. For this version of me, Elena said quietly, yes. The war room screens flickered again, switching to live feeds from multiple intelligence agencies. Arrests, raids, digital seizures. The scope of the conspiracy unfolded in real time. Elena watched in silence. Each face blurred on the monitors represented another piece of the puzzle she'd spent months building. Each one reminded her of the weight of what justice costs. Philip said softly, almost to himself, You don't look relieved. Elena's eyes stayed on the screen. Relief is for people who get to stop fighting. And for a brief second, the camera feeds reflected her face, calm, resolute eyes that had seen too much. The face of a woman, already halfway gone into the next war she hadn't yet been briefed on. When a person disappears, it doesn't happen in a moment. It happens in layers, a passport shredded in a furnace, a data file quietly deleted, a fingerprint replaced with another that tells a different story. For Lieutenant Colonel Elena Rodriguez, disappearance wasn't death, it was procedure. 2 days after the tribunal, she was escorted through an underground corridor beneath the Pentagon, the kind that didn't exist on any map. Her escort said nothing. The silence wasn't personal, it was protocol. At the end of the tunnel waited a single elevator with no buttons, no floor indicators, just a scanner. She pressed her palm to the glass plate. The doors slid open. When they closed again, her name ceased to exist. The next time she looked in a mirror, it was inside a safe house in Langley. Her reflection was the same steady eyes, same calm poise, but the file on the table beside her carried a new name, Elena Markovic, Serbian national, freelance security consultant. No military record, no family, no country. She stared at it for a long time, not out of hesitation, but out of memory of everything that came before this moment. The price of anonymity was always the same. You lose pieces of yourself until only purpose remains. A soft knock broke her thoughts. Colonel Sarah Mitchell entered, carrying a sealed case. She set it on the table, her eyes softening when they met Elena. I wasn't sure you'd still be here, Mitchell said quietly. Elena smirked faintly. Where else would I go? Mitchell opened the case. Inside was a small tablet, a flash drive sealed in lead foil, and a single handgun disassembled, cleaned, oiled. You're being reassigned under Directive Echo 7, Mitchell said. Your new objective is embedded in that drive. You'll be inserted through our European Operations Wing. The official record lists you as a private contractor working for the Balkan Defense Alliance. Elena's expression didn't change, unofficially. Mitchell hesitated. You'll be hunting what's left of Project Ravel. The name hung in the air like a returning storm. Elena glanced down at the drive. Any intel on leadership? Minimal, but counterintelligence believes Stone's contacts weren't just external assets. There's chatter about a secondary command, someone known only as the architect. He's the one who built Ravel's framework, cell by cell. The architect, Elena repeated softly. So the man who designs betrayal never shows his own face. Mitchell's voice lowered. Be careful, Elena. Whoever this is, they knew how to hide an entire network inside our own systems for nearly 2 years. That takes someone who understands both sides. Elena's eyes flicked up, meaning. Mitchell met her gaze, meaning they might be one of ours. The silence between them stretched. Finally, Elena said, "Then I'll find them." Mitchell's hand tightened on the edge of the table, "And when you do." Elena looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, "I'll do what's necessary." There was no threat in her voice, no pride either, just fact. Mitchell swallowed hard. "If you ever need an extraction." "I won't." "Elena." "Don't call me that," she said softly. "Not anymore." Mitchell nodded slowly. "Right, of course." As she left, Elena sat back, staring at the case for a while longer. Then, with deliberate calm, she reassembled the handgun piece by piece. It wasn't preparation. It was meditation. Each click of metal meeting metal was a rhythm, a way to center herself before vanishing again. When she was done, she placed the weapon in its holster, picked up the drive, and slipped it into her jacket pocket. Outside, the night air smelled of rain. Within 12 hours, she was gone. The train rolled through the gray dawn like a ghost. Through its windows, Europe unfolded, fields blurred by fog, small towns still asleep, cities waking under the quiet hum of normal life. To the people seated near her, she was just another passenger, quiet, well-dressed, eyes lost in thought. They didn't know her story. They didn't know that her real passport had been burned or that her new one bore a name tied to no living family. She carried no weapon now, only a single black phone and a paper map creased from overuse. Every agent has a ritual before a new operation. Some pray, some drink, some write letters they'll never send. Elena watched the fog curl against the train window and did none of those things. She simply breathed, slow, steady, unshaken. At 700, her phone vibrated once. A single message appeared. Ravel contact Zurich, 48 hours. She didn't reply, just memorized the coordinates, then crushed the SIM between her thumb and the table's edge. The man seated across from her flinched slightly at the sharp crack of plastic. She gave him a polite smile, then looked away. By the time the train reached Zurich, the phone was in a river. Zurich was clean, quiet, deceptive. The kind of city where money flowed like oxygen and nobody asked where it came from. Her contact was supposed to be a banker, ex-intelligence turned asset handler. Name, Dusan Kohler. She found him exactly where the file predicted, sitting at an outdoor cafe near Bahnhofstrasse, sipping espresso like a man who'd never been hunted. Elena Markovic, she introduced herself as she sat down. He looked up, expression cool, eyes flicking across her posture, her hands, her tone. Then, with a faint smile, he replied, "You're early." "Time isn't something I waste," she said. "Good," he replied, "because neither does the man you're looking for." He slid a small envelope across the table. Inside, a photo. A man in his 50s wearing a gray coat stepping out of a private jet. The background, Geneva. The timestamp, yesterday. "Name?" she asked. Kohler's eyes darted around the street. "We don't use names in this business, but people call him the architect." Her fingers tightened slightly on the photo. "You've met him." "Once briefly. He doesn't meet twice." "Meaning?" "Meaning the second time someone tries, they don't leave breathing." Elena studied the man's face, sharp jawline, cold eyes, an expression of control. "You have an address." Kohler hesitated. "You're not hearing me. This isn't someone you track. He tracks you. I give you that location and I'm already dead." She looked at him, calm but not unkind. "Then don't give me an address. Give me a direction." He stared at her for a long time, then sighed. "There's a facility, underground, abandoned NATO relay station outside Geneva. Word is that's where the meetings happen." Elena folded the photo, slipped it into her coat. You've done your part. Kohler hesitated again. One more thing. If you find him, don't assume he's just another spy. The architect's different. He's personal. She frowned. Personal how? He looked her straight in the eyes. He knows who you are. The words landed like a dull punch to the chest. Elena didn't react, not outwardly, but something in her pulse shifted. What did you say? Kohler's voice dropped lower. He called you by name, not Markovic, not Rodriguez, the real one, before all this. Her silence said everything. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter. Get out of Zurich tonight. He blinked. Why? Because if he knows me, he knows you now too. She stood, left enough cash to cover his drink, and disappeared into the crowd before he could say another word. That night, under the dim orange of a streetlight near Lake Geneva, Elena sat alone on a bench, the cold air brushing across her face. Her hands were steady, but her thoughts weren't. He knows who you are. It wasn't fear that unsettled her. It was recognition, the echo of a life she'd buried long ago, a name she'd never told anyone, not even the people who'd trained her. How could he know? She closed her eyes, the lake's surface glimmering in the distance. Then she remembered something Stone had said before his arrest. You have no idea what's coming. He hadn't been threatening her, he'd been warning her. Maybe the architect wasn't just a handler or a strategist. Maybe he'd been inside this from the beginning. Maybe he'd built her too. A faint sound broke through her thoughts, the low hum of a drone overhead. She didn't look up, just stood, walked casually toward the street, and disappeared beneath the overpass, blending into the rhythm of the city like a shadow no one noticed. By the time the drone passed overhead again, the bench was empty. Only the faint imprint of her presence remained, the shape of a woman who'd vanished so many times before that disappearing had become her second nature. But this time, she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't just hunting the architect anymore. He was hunting her too. And somewhere deep down, beneath all the training and the calm, something very human stirred, a question she'd spent years avoiding. Who had she really been before the missions, before the lies, before the disappearances? For the first time in years, Elena didn't have an answer. Only a feeling, the weight of unfinished history. How do you hunt someone who already knows where you'll be? That question looped in Elena's mind as she moved through Geneva's underbelly, the silent network of service tunnels and forgotten subways that ran beneath the pristine streets tourists never saw. Above ground, the city was elegance, banks, marble facades, and the illusion of control. Below, it was something else, damp air, echoing pipes, the hum of old infrastructure feeding systems no one maintained anymore. She moved like water, quiet and invisible, every motion deliberate, every breath measured. The coordinates Kohler had given her led here, an old NATO relay station buried outside the city's limits, decommissioned decades ago after the Cold War, officially sealed. Unofficially, it had a new life. As she neared the end of the tunnel, she paused. The walls trembled faintly, low-frequency vibrations, mechanical. Power was running through the old cables again. Someone had turned the place back on. She crouched beside a rusted access panel, pried it open with a knife, and slipped a small fiber optic scope through the gap. The hallway ahead was lit by soft white LEDs, too modern for the 1980s architecture. Motion sensors. No guards. That was the first warning sign. When a place meant to be secure has no guards, it means the danger isn't outside. She stepped through the door and entered the facility. The silence pressed in, not empty, but listening. Every few meters, she caught glimpses of movement, faint reflections in polished steel, the flicker of light that shouldn't have been there. And then the hum. Faint, mechanical, rhythmic. A server core still active. She followed it deeper until the tunnel widened into a control chamber. Rows of modern servers blinked in eerie symmetry, cables running along the ceiling like veins. On one of the screens, an image appeared. Her face. No uniform, no alias. Just her. She froze, the air leaving her lungs for a fraction of a second. Then a voice filled the room, smooth, calm, unhurried. "You took longer than I expected." It wasn't a recording, it was live. Elena turned slowly toward the sound. A man stood at the far end of the room, half in shadow. Gray coat, sharp jawline, the same face from the photo. The architect. He looked older than she imagined, but not weak. The kind of man who carried power like a second skin, quiet, dangerous, deliberate. Elena didn't reach for her weapon, not yet. "You've been expecting me," she said. He smiled faintly, for quite some time. Her eyes flicked to the nearest console. The live feed of her own biometric data pulsed across the screen, heart rate, respiration, even neural pattern estimates. "You've been tracking me," she said. "I designed the system that tracks you," he replied, "long before you realized you were inside it." She stepped closer, each footfall echoing softly. "Then tell me something. Why now? Why expose yourself?" He studied her, expression unreadable. "Because every architect eventually has to step into his own creation." Elena's eyes narrowed. "You built Ravel." He nodded, "among other things." "And Stone worked for you." Stone worked for himself, like most men who think power is loyalty. She took another step. "Then what do you want from me?" He tilted his head slightly. "That's the wrong question, Lieutenant Colonel." Her pulse spiked. "You know who I am." "I know everything about you," he said simply. "Before Rodriguez, before Black Widow, before all of it." The stillness in the room sharpened. "Impossible," she whispered. "Your training started under a program called Ascendant, didn't it?" he continued. "You were told it was disbanded before your first deployment. It was." Her throat tightened. Ascendant was shut down. He smiled, calm, knowing. "No, my dear, it evolved, and you're the proof." She took a step back, hand brushing her sidearm now. "You're lying." He didn't move. "I designed the Ascendant cognitive mapping protocols. The way your mind compartmentalizes trauma, processes pattern recognition faster than fear, separates empathy from reaction. Do you think that was coincidence?" Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. He stepped closer, his tone softening, almost paternal. "You were created for infiltration that transcended loyalty. You were built to survive what normal operatives couldn't. That's why Stone couldn't break you. You weren't his soldier." "Then whose am I?" she asked quietly. He smiled faintly. "Mine." The words hit like static in her skull. For a moment she wasn't in the room anymore. She was back in a concrete facility, 19 years old, electrodes taped to her temples, listening to instructors talk about emotional suppression and pattern loops. The memories weren't new, but the context was. She realized then she hadn't remembered everything. Someone had designed her memory itself. "You manipulated me," she said, her voice trembling just enough to make it human. "I made you," he corrected softly. "And now you're here to decide if you want to destroy your own origin." She drew her weapon slowly. "You're done talking." He didn't flinch. "Am I?" Behind him, a dozen screens flickered on. Images, files, videos. Her training records. Her missions. Her kills. But also photos of people. Civilians. Faces she didn't recognize. A woman in a hospital. A child with her eyes. Her breath caught. "What is this?" "Collateral," he said. "Lives rewritten to build yours. Every file erased from the system created a hole. We filled it with ghosts." Her hand trembled now, just barely. "You expect me to believe this?" "I expect you to feel it." He turned toward the screens. "You think you've been chasing me for justice, but everything you've done, every order you followed, I planted it there. breadcrumbs leading you back here, to this room. Why? So you could choose. Choose what? Whether to end the program or become its next architect. The silence afterward was deafening. She lowered her gun a fraction. You think I'd ever continue what you built? He smiled faintly. You already have. Every decision you made in the last 18 months calculated, manipulated, efficient. You've been operating under protocols I wrote years ago. You've been living proof the system works. Her voice cracked slightly. You're wrong, I chose. Did you? He said softly. Or did I teach you to believe you did? The weapon shook now, just barely perceptible. For the first time, Elena felt something she hadn't felt in years: doubt. Her mind, trained for precision, started fracturing under the weight of implication. What if her entire career, every betrayal, every mission, had been orchestrated by the same mind she was now pointing a gun at? You can kill me, he said calmly, taking another step closer. But you'll never know what else I built inside you. Stop, she whispered. Neural conditioning, memory suppression triggers. How do you know I didn't place one more failsafe, one you haven't discovered yet? Stop. Maybe every time you think you're making a choice, you're following a script I wrote. Her hand steadied suddenly. The fear evaporated. I don't need to know, she said. He frowned slightly. What? I don't need to know what you built, because you'll never understand what you didn't. And she pulled the trigger. The sound thundered through the metal chamber, short, final. He staggered back, one hand pressed to his chest, surprise flickering across his face. You. Elena's expression stayed calm, cold, but her eyes carried something that wasn't anger. It was sorrow. You forgot something, she said quietly. I wasn't built to obey, I was built to adapt. He fell against the console, the light from the monitors bleeding across his coat as he slid to the floor. The servers behind him hummed, 1,000 lines of code still running, still breathing. She approached slowly, stepped over his fallen body, and stared at the screens. Rows of encrypted data blinked, the framework of Ascendant, the map of every operative trained under its influence. Dozens of names, hundreds. She could end it right there. Delete the program. Erase its history. Or she could keep it. Rebuild it. Use it. For a long moment she just stood there. The air smelled of ozone and burnt circuitry. Outside, dawn was starting to bleed through the vents, pale light cutting across her face. Then she made her choice. Her fingers danced across the keyboard, not to delete but to rewrite. Lines of code shifted, directives inverted. The system that once controlled operatives now broadcasted a single encrypted signal to all active units. You are free. One by one the servers shut down, the lights dimmed, the hum faded. Elena holstered her weapon and exhaled, a long, quiet breath that seemed to drain years of weight from her shoulders. Behind her the architect's body lay still, eyes open, staring at the ceiling, the faintest trace of a smile on his lips. Maybe he'd wanted this. Maybe this was part of his design too. But as she walked toward the exit, her steps echoed with something final. She wasn't walking away from him. She was walking away from the idea that she had ever been anyone's creation. Outside, the dawn light broke across the mountains. The world kept turning. And for the first time in years, Elena Rodriguez, or whatever her name truly was, felt something she hadn't felt since before she became a ghost. Freedom. Not the kind you win. The kind you remember. It began with silence. The kind that only happens before the world realizes something has changed. At 0400 GMT, encrypted networks across 6 continents flickered. Military firewalls blinked, air-gapped servers reconnected for fractions of seconds, and dormant systems activated without human command. By 0400 03, 23 intelligence agencies had detected anomalies they couldn't explain. By 04, 05, every signal converged into a single phrase. You are free. No one knew where it came from. No one could trace it. But every operative who had ever been part of Project Ascendant received it, directly, invisibly, deep in the neurolinks coded into their cognitive architecture. Some were asleep. Some were in prison. Some had been missing for years. All of them woke up. And they remembered everything. Elena stood on a mountainside outside Geneva, the morning wind cutting across her face. The relay station behind her was quiet now, its servers dark, its architect dead. For the first time, she didn't feel watched, but she didn't feel safe either. She destroyed control, yes, but she'd also unleashed it. Somewhere out there, hundreds of operatives had just regained memories that were never meant to exist. Agents, assassins, infiltrators, each one trained to kill, conditioned to obey, and suddenly unbound. Freedom, she realized, wasn't the same thing as peace. Her earpiece crackled, a faint burst of static that shouldn't have been possible. Then a familiar voice. Rodriguez, if that's even still your name. She froze. Tors. You're hard to track, harder to explain. Do you have any idea what's happening right now? She exhaled softly. I can imagine. No, you can't, he snapped. We've got chaos in 3 embassies, 2 black sites are offline, and half of Europe's intelligence feeds just went dark. It's not just our agents, it's everyone. British, French, Israeli, all of them. Whoever you just woke up, they're moving. Elena's tone didn't change. Then the program was deeper than we thought. This isn't a program anymore, Tors said. It's a plague. His words lingered in her ear like ash. Commands labeling you rogue. They're pulling everything. You're officially burned, Elena. I figured. General Webb issued a retrieval order. If you're caught, they'll bury you under a name no one remembers. Then I won't be caught. Don't be arrogant. You started something you can't contain. She paused. Containment was the problem. I ended it. There was a beat of silence. When Tors spoke again, his voice had softened, almost pleading. Elena, what did you do? She looked out over the valley, the sunrise washing the sky in pale gold. I gave them back their will, she said quietly. Whatever comes next, that's theirs to decide. You think you freed them, Tors said. But what if they don't want freedom? What if all they remember is pain? Elena didn't answer, because she already knew he was right. By midday, the chaos had names. A Russian cyber unit vanished from its base outside Murmansk. An Israeli operative surfaced in Athens and vanished again an hour later. An American strike team in Iraq turned on its own handler, claiming false memories. Governments called it a coordinated attack. Analysts called it a data virus. No one realized it wasn't code, it was human. Dr. Richard Phillips stood in the Pentagon war room, eyes scanning satellite feeds and biometric logs. He hadn't slept in 30 hours. Colonel Sarah Mitchell leaned over the console beside him. Any trace of her? Phillips shook his head. No, but she's not hiding, not the way you think. Mitchell frowned, meaning. She's always been 2 steps ahead. If she wanted to vanish, she already has. If she's still traceable, it's because she wants to be. Mitchell exhaled sharply. I don't like that theory. Neither do I, he admitted, but it fits. On the main screen, a world map pulsed with red markers, everyone representing a former Ascendant operative who'd reactivated in the last 6 hours. Mitchell whispered, God help us. Phillips didn't respond, because deep down he wasn't sure which side God would choose. That evening, Elena crossed into Italy under a false passport. The train carriage was half empty, its windows reflecting her face back at her, tired, cold, alive. She sat with her thoughts, watching the landscape blur into twilight. The architect's words haunted her. You'll never know what else I built inside you. Was there truth in it? Had she only replaced one illusion with another? Freedom for her had always come at a cost, usually someone else's blood. But this time it wasn't just a mission, it was personal. A voice startled her from her thoughts. You dropped this. A young woman stood beside her, holding a folded photograph. It wasn't hers, but when Elena looked closer, her breath caught. It was a photo of herself, younger, laughing, in civilian clothes. The woman smiled. Sorry, found it near your seat, must have fallen from your bag. Elena took it slowly. Thank you. The woman nodded, then walked away, earbuds back in, unaware of what she just handed over. Elena stared at the photo, the background a street in Belgrade. The date 10 years ago. But she didn't remember ever being there. She turned the photo over, on the back in small handwriting. You were never alone. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, from realization. The architect wasn't working alone. Someone else was still out there, someone who'd known her before she became Black Widow. Someone who just left a message to remind her. Back in Washington, General Webb's voice filled the war room, heavy with controlled rage. She's out there. She triggered the cascade, and if we don't neutralize her, every covert asset we've buried since 2012 will surface by week's end. Mitchell stood rigid. Sir, what if she's not the enemy? Webb turned sharply. She freed classified operatives, Colonel, half of whom were deemed unstable before they vanished. You call that salvation? Philip spoke quietly. Maybe she didn't free them for herself. Maybe she freed them because she knows something we don't. Webb's glare was cold. Doctor, you're mistaking defiance for insight. She's compromised. And if she's right about Ascendant being active beyond our oversight, we're already at war with our own creation. The room fell into heavy silence. Mitchell's voice came soft. Sir, if she's truly rogue, she'll head east. That's where her trail always ends. Webb nodded. Then we'll be waiting. Night fell over Venice. Elena stepped off the ferry into narrow streets glowing under dim lanterns. Her reflection rippled in the canals, fractured like her name. She'd spent years mastering the art of disappearing. But now, every shadow felt familiar, every corner watched. The photograph weighed heavy in her pocket. She followed the address scribbled faintly on the back, an old warehouse near the docks. Inside, the air smelled of salt and dust. She drew her weapon, sweeping the flashlight beam across the room. Then movement. A figure stepped out from behind a pillar. Not the architect, not an enemy. A woman. Older, gray at the edges, eyes sharp with memory. Elena, she said softly, you shouldn't have come. Elena froze. The voice, it reached something buried deep inside her. Who are you? The woman smiled sadly. You don't remember me. Elena's pulse spiked. Should I? The woman took a slow step closer. I was your handler before Ascendant. Elena's throat tightened. That's impossible. My first handler was. A cover, the woman finished gently. We hid you before the trials began. You weren't supposed to know me again. Elena lowered the gun slightly. Why now? Why reach out? Because you did what none of us could, the woman said. You broke the code, you set them free. Elena's eyes hardened. You were part of it. Yes, the woman said, and I regret it every day. Elena stared at her. Then help me understand, what was Ascendant really? The woman's gaze darkened. It wasn't about control, it was about evolution. They believed if you removed empathy, you could perfect obedience. But they were wrong. The mind always finds its way back to feeling. Is that what I am? A mistake? No, the woman said softly. You're proof that even the perfect weapon can choose mercy. The words hit deeper than she expected. Elena holstered the weapon slowly. Then why are you here? Because when you killed the architect, the woman said, you didn't end the program, you only cut off its head. Elena's breath stilled. There's more. The woman nodded. There's always more. The architect was a designer, but the financier, the one who authorized everything, he's still alive. Who? The woman hesitated. Someone inside your own government. The air between them froze. Elena took a step back. Name. I can't, the woman said. Not yet. You wouldn't believe me without proof. Then find it, Elena said. The woman nodded once. I already have a lead, but it'll take time. Until then, trust no one. She turned to leave. Wait, Elena called. If this goes higher, what happens to me? The woman looked back. You'll have to decide whether you're still part of their system or the one who finally breaks it. Then she was gone, swallowed by the night. Elena stood alone in the dim warehouse, the sound of water lapping softly against the pier outside. Somewhere beyond these quiet streets, the world was unraveling. And she had just learned the most dangerous truth of all. The war she thought she'd ended hadn't even begun. Somewhere between guilt and duty, there's a line people stop seeing clearly. Elena had crossed it years ago. But tonight she could feel it again. The air in Venice was sharp, metallic, the kind of chill that carries silence in its wake. The docks were empty except for the echoes of the sea. The older woman's words still echoed louder than the tide. Someone inside your own government. Elena walked until the city swallowed her. She kept to the narrow paths, shadows spilling from crumbling walls, her mind mapping exits automatically. A habit that came from too many years of expecting bullets where there should have been peace. She found a small cafe still open at midnight, ordered espresso, and sat near the window. The warmth of the cup didn't reach her fingers. Her reflection in the glass stared back, calm, cold, familiar. But something was different now. For the first time since Geneva, she wasn't just reacting. She was remembering. The woman's face, her voice, the faint scar above her left eyebrow, it wasn't unfamiliar. It was buried, a memory half erased by training. Elena closed her eyes. And for the first time in years, she let herself remember. A training facility, concrete walls, fluorescent light, the hum of old machinery. And a woman in a gray coat, standing over her hospital bed after the Ascendant trials. She said something then, something Elena hadn't understood. If you ever wake up and don't know who to trust, look for the cracks. They'll lead you home. She'd forgotten that until now. Home. A word she hadn't used in over a decade. By dawn, she was already moving again. The photograph from the train, still folded in her pocket, had an address faintly visible when held to light. Not the warehouse, but a post office box in Washington, D.C. She booked a cargo flight under a false manifest, crossed into U.S. airspace by posing as a technician on a NATO equipment transfer, and landed before anyone even realized she was gone. Washington felt heavier this time. The sky gray, the streets wet, and the city alive with 1,000 lies dressed as normalcy. She didn't go near the Pentagon. She didn't have to. Instead, she went to the address. The post office was small, buried between an old law firm and a florist. She approached the counter, presented the small card she'd found with the photo. The clerk hesitated. You're here for box 219. Yes. He looked at the name, Elena Markovic. That's right. He nodded and disappeared behind the wall. When he returned, he handed her a small, flat envelope. No return address, just a single wax seal, the old military kind, with an insignia barely visible. She turned it in her hand. The symbol was familiar, a circle, 3 lines intersecting at the center. Her chest tightened. She'd seen that emblem before in the Ascendant archive, stamped on top-secret directives marked Eyes Only, Authorization Level Omega. It was the seal of the Defense Oversight Bureau, an organization so secret most generals pretended it didn't exist. She left the building, turned down the alley, and opened the envelope. Inside were 3 items: a flash drive, a photo, and a note handwritten in ink that had started to fade. The photo showed a man standing beside Admiral Stone, shaking hands with a foreign minister. His face was weathered, familiar. It took her a moment to place him. General Arthur Webb, the same man who'd ordered her reassignment. The note was brief. He signed the Ascendant funding authorization. He buried the records. He made you. Her pulse slowed, not out of shock, out of clarity. All this time, she'd been working for the man who'd created the very program she'd spent her life trying to escape. She closed her hand around the note until it crumpled. Then she turned back toward the city. Inside the Pentagon, the mood had shifted from confusion to containment. General Webb stood at the head of the table, his voice low but commanding. "I want every digital trace of Project Ascendant buried. I don't care what it takes. The public cannot know this program ever existed." Colonel Sarah Mitchell exchanged a look with Dr. Phillips. "Sir, if what she released reaches Congress—" "It won't," Webb interrupted. "I've already initiated a blackout order. She won't survive long enough to testify." Phillips leaned forward. "Sir, with respect, if she's right, if Ascendant reached into allied governments, then you're suppressing evidence that could stop another war." Webb's gaze turned to him slowly, cold and deliberate. "Doctor, I didn't bring you in here to moralize. I brought you here because you're the only one who understood her. So tell me, where would she go?" Phillips hesitated. "She'd go to the source." "Meaning?" "Meaning here." Before Webb could respond, the room's lights flickered. The secure channel console on the wall activated on its own. And her voice filled the room. "Good morning, General." Webb froze. "Rodriguez." "It's been a long time since someone called me that." He gestured to a technician. "Trace it." "Don't bother," Elena said. "I'm not transmitting, you are." Mitchell's console lit up, code scrolling rapidly. "Sir, she's hijacking the secure feed from inside the network. She's piggybacked through our own encryption." Webb's jaw tightened. "What do you want?" "Just a conversation," Elena said calmly, "about the things you built." "You have no idea what you're playing with." "I think I do. Project Ascendant, cognitive mapping, behavioral conditioning. You created it under psychological warfare research. But it wasn't war you were fighting, was it?" Webb's silence said everything. "You wanted soldiers who didn't question, operatives who didn't break. You called it evolution." "That program saved lives," Webb said sharply. "You were proof it worked." "No," she said quietly. "I was proof it broke people and made them useful afterward." Mitchell stared at Webb, realization dawning in her eyes. "Sir, you knew." Webb's voice dropped. "Watch yourself, Colonel." "You signed the funding, General. You signed me." His hand slammed against the table. "You were an asset, Rodriguez. You volunteered." "I was 19, she said softly. "I didn't even know my own memories were altered. You made me kill people I didn't remember until years later." Silence filled the room like pressure. "So here's the deal," Elena continued. "You end what's left of Ascendant. You disclose every record, every name, every agent still being controlled, or I do it for you." Webb laughed, low, dangerous. "You think the world will believe a ghost with no identity? I'll erase you from every file before your voice finishes echoing." "You already tried that once," she said, "and here I am." The connection cut abruptly. For a moment, no one moved. Then Mitchell turned slowly toward Webb. "Sir, is it true?" Webb straightened. "Everything she said is classified." "That's not an answer." "Then here's one," he said coldly. "She's a threat to national security. If she contacts anyone again, you treat her as an enemy combatant." Mitchell's face hardened. Sir, with respect, I joined to defend the country, not to erase its mistakes. Webb's voice sharpened. You're either with me, Colonel, or you're next. Philip stepped between them. You don't have to do this. I already did, Webb said. Then he turned to the technicians. Find her. That night the city slept uneasily. Elena stood in the reflection of the Potomac, staring at the Capitol lights flickering across the water. The note lay open in her hand. Webb's face stared back at her from the photo, smiling, confident, untouchable. She'd spent her entire life fighting enemies she could see. Now the real one was a man who'd hidden behind the same flag she'd sworn to serve. For a moment, she wanted to disappear again, to vanish into some quiet corner of the world and let the system collapse under its own weight. But then she remembered the 12 operatives she'd freed. The woman in the warehouse. The lives she'd destroyed, and the ones she could still protect. Running wasn't survival anymore, it was surrender. She opened her phone, encrypted the line, and sent a single message to the one person she still trusted. To Tors. Message: meet me at dawn. Lincoln Memorial, come alone. She closed the device, slipped it into her pocket, and looked out over the city one last time. Washington had always looked beautiful from a distance. White marble, clean lines, the illusion of integrity. But beauty, she knew, was just the first layer of control. And tomorrow she was going to tear it down. They say the truth doesn't explode, it seeps. It starts as a whisper in the right corridor, then grows teeth. By the time Washington woke, the whisper had already become a storm. At 6:00 a.m., an encrypted data packet appeared in every major government communication hub. It wasn't from a foreign adversary or a hacker group. The encryption signature matched internal Pentagon access, the kind that shouldn't exist outside a classified vault. Inside the file, decades of documents, Ascendant's psychological conditioning trials, photos of the operatives who'd vanished, and one name stamped across every approval line: General Arthur Webb. Within minutes, the leak spread. Journalists, analysts, even retired officers were calling each other in disbelief. The world was learning that the government had built weapons out of human minds and buried the evidence behind medals and folded flags. The official statement called it a sophisticated forgery. But behind closed doors, every official recognized the signature key embedded in the data. It was genuine. It was catastrophic. And somewhere beneath the marble calm of D.C., the woman who'd sent it was watching the city ignite. Elena sat in a small safe house across the river, the room dim except for the glow of 3 monitors. News anchors' faces flickered, each one echoing the same disbelief. The documents appear to confirm an illegal intelligence program known as Ascendant. Sources say psychological manipulation of military operatives. And the woman known only by her call sign, Black Widow, is believed to be the whistleblower. She muted the feed. It wasn't pride she felt, not relief either, just stillness. The truth was finally loose. But freedom, real freedom, never came clean. Her encrypted phone vibrated. The message was short. Meet Capital 0900 alone. Signed with a code she hadn't seen in years, Tors. She stared at it, unsure if it was real or bait. But she already knew her choice. There were no more hiding places left. The Capitol building was chaos dressed in suits, security doubled, reporters flooding the steps, agents moving like silent currents. A congressional emergency hearing had been called to address the Ascendant leak. Cameras lined the chamber like guns, red lights blinking. At the center table sat General Arthur Webb, immaculate uniform, ribbons aligned, eyes cold as ever. To his right, a row of counsel. To his left, silence, waiting for someone who hadn't arrived yet. The committee chair tapped the mic. General Webb, The committee has received documentation implicating you in the funding and oversight of Project Ascendant. Do you deny these claims?" Webb's tone was perfectly rehearsed. "I categorically deny any involvement in unauthorized psychological experimentation." The cameras clicked. The world leaned closer. Then a second microphone went live. A woman's voice cut through the noise. "That's a lie." Every head turned. She stepped into the chamber, unarmed, unguarded, wearing the simple black field jacket she'd worn the day they tried her. Elena Rodriguez. Security froze, orders flickering in their earpieces, but no one daring to act. Even the guards recognized her face now, the face that had broken the news cycle, the ghost who'd haunted their encrypted channels for weeks. She walked with the steady calm of someone who'd already made peace with the cost. The chair rose. "This chamber is restricted." "Then restrict me," she said, her voice even. "But you'll have to silence every camera in this room to do it." The murmurs rippled through the chamber. Webb's jaw locked. "You don't belong here." "Neither does the truth," she said. The chair gestured sharply to security. "Remove her." But the guards hesitated. The world was watching. Elena stepped forward and placed a small drive on the committee desk. "Everything I leaked is on that, the unredacted version." Webb stood. "You have no authority." She turned toward him. "You built the program, Arthur. You signed the orders. You turned soldiers into tools, and when they broke, you buried them under memorial plaques. You called it patriotism." His voice hardened. "That program saved thousands of lives. We used data, not people." Her eyes darkened. "I was one of those data points." A hush rolled through the chamber. "You erased my family, my history, my memory. You reprogrammed it to fit a mission profile, obedience without empathy." Webb's eyes flicked toward the cameras. "You expect them to believe this. You're an unstable operative. You were compromised." She reached into her jacket and pulled out a small device, a biometric drive. "You see this? It records neurochemical markers from Ascendant implants. It's transmitting live. Every memory you modified, every neural lock you placed, it's all linked to your authorization codes." Gasps echoed. Webb's counsel whispered urgently. Elena placed the drive on the table. "You called me Black Widow because I always came back alive, but you never realized why. You didn't build a weapon, General. You built a conscience that refused to die." Webb's mask cracked. "You don't understand the stakes." "I understand better than anyone," she said. "You taught me that the ends justify everything, but there's a line even soldiers shouldn't cross." The chairman leaned forward. "Ms. Rodriguez, are you claiming this man orchestrated human experimentation?" "I'm not claiming," she said quietly. "I'm remembering." Her gaze locked on Webb, and so will the world. For a heartbeat, the room held still, the weight of years pressing down in a single instant. Then Webb lunged. He reached across the table, slamming a hand toward the drive, but a guard intercepted, weapons drawn. Shouts filled the chamber, cameras flashed. In the chaos, Elena turned toward the nearest lens. "Broadcast this," she said, "every word." And then a sound no one expected. A gunshot. Not hers. Webb had drawn his concealed weapon, fury breaking through his composure. The guards reacted instantly, but not before one round found its mark. Elena staggered. The chamber erupted, agents yelling. Webb tackled to the floor, cameras capturing every second. She pressed a hand to her side, warmth spreading beneath her palm. The world blurred into sound and light. Torres appeared from the back of the chamber, forcing his way through the chaos. "Elena." She looked at him, calm, steady even now. "You shouldn't have come." "Stay with me." She smiled faintly. "I told you I wouldn't run again." He caught her as she collapsed, lowering her to the floor, blood pooling against the polished marble. Around them the cameras rolled endlessly. Reporters shouted. Webb's voice screamed from behind restraints, his words lost under the roar of outrage. But she didn't hear it. All she heard was the silence she'd been chasing her entire life. They rushed her outside, the cold air burning her lungs. The sirens wailed somewhere distant. Torres held pressure on the wound, voice trembling. "We've got medics coming, just hold on." She shook her head slightly. "It's already done." He looked at her, eyes wet. "You saved them all, Elena. You exposed everything." She smiled weakly. "Not everything." "What do you mean?" "There's still more hidden. There always is." Her voice faltered. "Promise me one thing." "Anything." "When this is over, don't let them turn me into a story. Let me stay what I was, a soldier who remembered too much." He nodded, unable to speak. She reached up, her hand trembling, brushing the blood from his cheek. "You were the first person to see me as human. Don't forget that." Then her eyes drifted toward the sunrise, breaking over the Capitol dome. And for a moment she looked peaceful. The footage went global. Within hours, every network on Earth carried the image of a woman bleeding on the Capitol steps, the truth she died for replaying in endless loops. General Arthur Webb was arrested before the day ended. His own signature appeared on every authorization she'd exposed. The hearings that followed tore apart an empire built on secrecy. But her name, her real name, was never spoken. The Pentagon called her a classified asset lost in active exposure. The public called her the widow who spoke. And among the operatives she'd freed, a new message began circulating quietly through encrypted channels. "Remember who you are," she did. Weeks later, Torres stood at Arlington under a cold gray sky. The grave was unmarked, just a stone with a code number and a small insignia, 3 intersecting lines inside a circle. He placed her tag on the grass and whispered, "They'll never know how much the world owed you." Philip stood beside him, silent. "You think she planned it?" Torres nodded slowly, every second. "Even dying?" Torres exhaled, "Especially that." They turned to leave, but as they did, Phillips noticed something etched faintly into the back of the tag, words she must have carved herself, maybe in the hours before walking into that chamber. He read them aloud softly. "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts." Across the ocean, in a safe house in rural France, a monitor flickered to life. An encrypted message appeared. No sender, no signature. Just one line. Black Widow protocol terminated. Memory archives unlocked. Dozens of operatives stared at their screens, each one remembering their lives again, the faces, the names, the choices. Some wept, some laughed, and some quietly saluted. Somewhere in that static, her voice seemed to whisper, not as command but as memory. "You're free now." Months later, in the Pentagon's classified annex, Colonel Sarah Mitchell stood before the same tribunal chamber where it had all begun. The walls were silent now, no alarms, no shouting. Just ghosts. She placed a single file on the table, stamped Ascendant, Terminated. And for the first time, she allowed herself to say it aloud. Elena Rodriguez, Black Widow, hero. Then she closed the file and turned off the lights. Outside, Washington moved on. The news cycles faded, the hearings ended. But in quiet corners of the intelligence world, her story lingered, not as legend, not as myth, but as something rarer. A reminder that the strongest soldiers aren't the ones who survive orders. They're the ones who break them for the right reasons. And if anyone asked who she really was, there was never a single answer. Some said she was a traitor. Some said she was a savior. But those who'd seen her eyes in that final moment, the calm, the fire, the peace, they knew better. She wasn't either. She was human. Finally,